Well, we have some huge news, and it is official. We made another video talking about this, but now it is official, straight from the horse's mouth. We have a statement out from Brian Kemp here, saying, quote, over the last few weeks, I've had many conversations with friends, supporters, and leaders across the country who encouraged me to run for the U.S. Senate in 2026. I greatly appreciate their support and prayers for our family. After those discussions, I have decided that being on the ballot next year is not the right decision for me and my family. What a joke. This really is. This is huge news. This is huge that Brian Kemp is not going to be running for the Senate in 2026. This really shakes everything up. It really does shake a lot of things up. There were recent polls out that showed Brian Kemp was the only candidate who was beating Jon Ossoff in preliminary polling right now. You have polls out here. The same poll that had Brian Kemp up 3 points on Jon Ossoff. Remember, Jon Ossoff won real close election, very close election back in 2020 over David Perdue. He lost in the initial vote, but then in the runoff, because neither candidate hit 50%, he was able to win. In this same poll here, Jon Ossoff is leading Brad Raffensperger by 9 points. 9 points. Marjorie Taylor Greene, he's leading by 15 points. 15 points. This is just absolutely ridiculous that Brian Kemp is not going to be running. And the only thing you can say of why he's running is for 2028. He's a young guy. He's like 61. He's 61 years old. He is young in politics. We know he's got his eyes set on the next level. But he didn't think the Senate was it. He thinks it's the presidency in 2028. I think he's going to get an unfortunate reality check that did not need to happen. But he's going to ultimately get a reality check in 2028 because he's not going to get the nomination. Let's just put it that way. I think he's a good Republican. I like Brian Kemp. He hasn't done everything perfect, don't get me wrong, but overall, if you had to ask me, I'm going to give him a better grade than most. But at the end of the day, this was his opportunity here. His opportunity was in the Senate. His opportunity to run in 2026 against Jon Ossoff in the Senate to defeat him. Because like we said, he was seen as the most formidable candidate to beat Jon Ossoff in the 2026 election. Because now who does this leave the Republican Party with? Because it's going to be in shambles in the Republican Party. The Republican Party will be in shambles. There is no doubt about that. It is not going to be good for anyone. Because you're going to have Jon Ossoff, who's going to be very well funded. Democrats and Republicans have already said they're willing to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into this race. Like, between North Carolina, between Maine, between Georgia, they're going to spend billions of dollars. So right now we have Buddy Carter, Mike Collins, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tyler Harper, John King, Rich McCormick, Brad Raffensperger, that have all said, that have either publicly expressed interest or that they potentially could be in this race. Which, to be honest with you, no one really sticks out of here. Except Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I think would be awful. Look, Marjorie Taylor Greene does a good job in the House. She represents a district in the northwest corner of Georgia, where she won very well. She won by 28 points. She won very well in this race. But ultimately, statewide is a completely different story. We're talking about winning people. Statewide. Like, this isn't just your district that you like up here. Dade County, Walker County, Floyd County. Like, you have to be able to perform throughout all of Georgia. And the reality is the brand that she has built does not perform well in Georgia. It's not going to perform statewide. Because the reality is Georgia has been shifting further and further to the left since like 2000. Look at this. Georgia voted for Bush by 11 points. 11 percentage points. Look at this. Al Gore won Clayton County, Fulton County, DeKalb County. Obviously, throughout the state, some of these less populated areas, you're seeing a lot more support for the Democrat. But now we are seeing the more populated areas going closer to the Democrat Party and the less populated areas going closer to the Republican Party. Fast forward to 2024. Look at this here. It's not just Fulton County, DeKalb County, and Clayton County. Henry County, Rockdale County, Newton County, Gwinnett County, Clark County, Cobb County, Douglas County. It's just ridiculous. The state has shifted so much to the left compared to where it was. And now, was it ever like this Republican stronghold? No. But it was a state that a solid Republican could win by 5 to 10 points. There's no doubt about that. They could win 5 to 10 points. But you can see it has shifted. They even have right now 2 Democrat senators from the state of Georgia. Warnock was actually elected in 2022, and now Jon Ossoff won in 2020 against David Perdue in a runoff. Warnock, of course, won the special election against Kelly Loeffler. But ultimately, there are 2 Democrats that represent Georgia in the Senate. Jon Ossoff is seen as the most vulnerable Democrat. I shouldn't even say that. The most vulnerable senator up for re-election in 2026. He is the most vulnerable senator. He's going to be very well funded. You know, I'm on the mail-in list for the Democrat Party just so I can get all of their mail that's sent out. I like to see, what messages are they pushing. I get letters all the time from them. And I just got one recently in the mail from Jon Ossoff. It was sent out by the National Democrats, but it's for Jon Ossoff, raising money for Jon Ossoff to hold the Senate, to hold it. We're 18 months out from this election, and he is already hardcore fundraising. I'm also on his emailing list. He is really ramping up his rhetoric on impeaching Trump, which could that backfire on him? Potentially. I think there's a chance that the impeachment, just like impeachment in 2019 backfired, just like impeachment back in the 90s with Bill Clinton backfired, all of it. Ultimately, they're going to raise a lot of money. But you also have to deal with the fact that there's also a really competitive Georgia governor's race, gubernatorial race going on. And the declared candidate so far is Chris Carr, who I believe has the best opportunity to win statewide in Georgia, is Chris Carr. Absolutely. Chris Carr is the one. He probably has the best electoral history. He's the Attorney General. He's been the Attorney General for a decade. He's won some close elections, and he's won a lot of elections. But then you have Burt Jones, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Brad Raffensperger, Buddy Carter, who have all considered jumping in this race. And Burt Jones, okay, and this was from 2023. We're not even going to talk about that here. But this is the reality here. This is the reality you're staring down right here. Who is going to go up against Ossoff? Do I think at the end of the day it's still going to be a close election? Absolutely. But like we've talked about a lot, I had this seat. If all things considered, this is kind of where I had it. If I had to put my nose on or my thumb on everything, this is kind of where I had it. Okay, Republicans have been very disappointed. Chris Sununu, New Hampshire, not running. They thought they could flip that seat with Chris Sununu. You had the head of the National Senatorial, the Republican Senatorial Committee, their fundraising arm, actively trying to get Chris Sununu to jump in. He said no, and then Shaheen retired, and he said, okay, I'll think about it. Then he said no again. And then you have in North Carolina, Roy Cooper, who's a Democrat, who's probably going to run. That's going to be tough for Republicans. And now you're telling me that Georgia, Brian Kemp, is like, this goes to a toss-up state now. Oops. This goes to a toss-up state. Oh my goodness, am I just all over the freaking map today? Holy crap, I promise I haven't had anything to drink. Promise. But ultimately, this is going to be very, very tough for the Republicans. Who are they going to nominate? Obviously, I'm sure there were a lot of people who are holding out, waiting for Brian Kemp to make a decision, then they're going to jump in, or even throw their name out there. But still, if Democrats somehow find a way to hold on to Georgia and they flip North Carolina, Republicans are losing a seat in the Senate. That is not good. Obviously, do they still hold control? Yes, they do. But you're one vote away. You're now one vote further away from being able to break a filibuster. And to me, it's just absolutely ridiculous that Brian Kemp is not running, because I really believe that, and I've said this multiple times on this channel, you go back and look at all the videos I've had covering the Georgia Senate election and Brian Kemp. I've said that if he's not going to run in 26, he's running in 28. That I believe that. And could I be wrong? Absolutely. And if he proves me wrong and he's just going to retire, well, good for him. Enjoy the rest of your life. But ultimately, he's saying right here, I'm confident we'll be united in that important effort, and I look forward to electing the next generation of leaders up and down the ballot here in the Peach State who will keep our state and nation headed in the right direction in 2026 and beyond. I think it's a bad decision, and I think it's going to hurt the Republican Party. I don't think they have as strong of a candidate in anyone else than they had in Brian Kemp. They just didn't. That's the reality of the situation. But, folks, we now have it official from Brian Kemp. He is not jumping in this race. It's very, very sad. It's very pathetic, too, that he's not jumping in this race. And let's just jump over. I guarantee you this is going to be filled with a bunch of Brian Kemp stuff. Ready to go politics. Brian Kemp cost us Georgia Senate seat in 2020 by appointing Kelly Loeffler over Doug Collins. Now he's may well cost us another one by refusing to shoot a layup against Jon Ossoff. What a selfish loser. He probably thinks he has a chance to win in 2028 presidential nomination, which is even worse. Yeah, it's like, I don't agree with everything he's saying, but I do agree. I think this was a layup, and he's missing out on it. And he's decided not to take a slam dunk on this. It's just, I hate to say it, it's pathetic. It's pathetic that he's not doing this. But that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who do you think can lead the Republican ticket on the Senate side in Georgia in 2026? Let me know your thoughts, and we will catch you next time, folks.